Hello, 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 hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Matteo.
Hey, Luca. You have the cap, I have the glasses. So
I always have the cap, though.
I don't usually have the glasses, though. Sorry, guys. I have the glasses. I had a little bit of eye surgery a couple of days ago. My eyes are not. My eye is not. One of my eyes not pretty to look at. So it's better if you don't look at it in camera. So that's why I have my sunglasses. So you can I can be on the call on the stream with Luca without you looking at my stitches, which is definitely not pretty.
Hope everything will resolve soon, Matteo.
Hopefully next week. Next week we are in Paris, so I hope I things are great. To be honest.
Or else I will be your guide. I will be your Virgilio around the city.
Oh, that would be nice. You can walk me around. Pretty cool.
So today we decided to take a step into something a little bit different than not the usual. We have been talking about Kubernetes for now some time, but what about EKS and our best friend Fargate? Shall we kind of like deep dive into some stuff that we discover along the year and along the time?
Wow, yeah, there's a lot actually. Frankly, I had to learn Kubernetes the hard way. Okay, Luca, you learned probably the right way. I learned it the hard way. Okay, mostly banging out with you, and frankly, there is actually a lot. Okay, there is really a lot to be talked about. Okay. We have also recently found a regression in Node.js related to Kubernetes that might impact or not impact you. And therefore, it's fun. It's a fun one. Okay. And it's related to everybody's favorite topic, but I will leave that story till the end. And then we'll talk a little bit about that.
Till the end. So like a thriller story.
Like a thriller. It's a thriller story. Okay. It's a fun one. Or we can start with this fun story, but I think we should be for setting the stage a little bit, and then we can talk about the fun problems of Kubernetes and Node.js.
Yeah, let's start. I was thinking about that, right? And I apologize if I will look on the side, but now you know why. So when we decided to talk about, hosted and managed Kubernetes, we kind of like thought, okay, most of our leads, customers, people that we know are running in AWS. So let's look into EKS and Fargate, the most asked question. So one is clearly Elastic Kubernetes, and the other Fargate is the serverless way of running Kubernetes. And you and I have been talking for the past day and say, okay, but what shall we talk about, right? What is the storyline? And I told you, okay, let's jam on, how you run a node in Kubernetes again, because maybe missed the last time, or people wants maybe to ask more questions and didn't have an opportunity, and we give them the opportunity. But the other thing is, I know EKS and Fargate, fortunately, unfortunately, pretty well. But I said, okay, let me try to do something. And I know that you are a fan of my arch enemy right now, Claude. So I asked Claude the same question that anybody would ask me. What shall I do when I run node in EKS and Fargate? And I gave Claude some context, and I said, in finance, so let's imagine if I was a bank, if I was an e-commerce, and if I was a media company. Like, we talked about streaming last time, we talked about financial, we talked with Liran about security, and so I said, okay, let's ask Claude if Claude knows best, like Hulk Hogan. And so, if you are okay, Theo, and if everyone listening is okay, today I want to try something different. I want to have as our cicerone, as our guide, Claude, that I have on the side. And you and I are going to answer to what Claude suggests so that we are kind of like jamming together like we would usually do on reading on the internet. So just for transparency, I asked Claude a few questions and I said, hey, Claude, we are hosting a podcast on AWS, EKS, Fargate, and Node.js. I was wondering what you think about running Node in one of these two infrastructures, and how would you actually contextualize the use for enterprise companies in finance, media, and e-commerce? I skip you the first 2 or 3 answers because Claude was pretty confused. And without going to the intro on what is Node and what EKS that he thought was he or she thought that it was the best thing, we came to a point of asking a question, of 2 questions, and that's what we're going to use today. So the first one is that Claude told me how to configure Kubernetes for running Node for a financial institution.
Okay.
And the first thing that Claude said, set a security context. And he set the security context with allow privilege escalation false. So probably this is the first thing that we should tell. I think Claude is right. You should avoid for privilege escalation from your pods, right? That means you can take control over parents and go up in privilege in running your pod. So basically running as a root. Do you agree with Claude?
I don't really. I have a question. Why would somebody don't do that in all cases?
So because that's a very good question.
Like why only in financial institutions, to be honest, and why that's not the default?
Good, and that's exactly what I asked Claude. So I tell you that basically Claude said, well, you should actually run as non-root true, run as user 1000, so with lower privileges for people that are familiar with Linux, read only root file system true, which basically means you can only read your file system, you are acting as a user, you cannot escalate with sudo. Okay, and he said this is essential because this is essential for SOX compliance.
Oh, okay.
I didn't dare to ask Claude to explain me how SOX compliance will read into that because I was scared to kind of like dig into a black hole, but I said, okay. Then Claude is telling me network isolation. Implement network policies to enforce strict communication boundaries. And you know what we should do? When we write the recap of this chat, I will save the chat and we can use all this.
Yeah, but you can even what you can do is that you can even share and link. So you can actually link the full chat if it's fine. You can just put the full chat.
I would, but I was swearing to Claude most of the time.
At some point somebody would do a movement of no disrespect towards AIs.
I mean, if you tell me stupid things, you get stupid answer, right? And
you should always be polite, even to AIs.
I will be more polite to Claude when he's basically telling me you should have labels for each pod, and your ingress should point only to that label. So basically to label resources and creating one-on-one links from the ingress to the pod. But now it comes to the point that probably you like, Theo. Because this one is like secret management. AWS Secret Manager integration with EKS for managing database credential and API keys. And is writing a JavaScript function using the SDK.
Okay.
That we all know is super fast doing this thing. And it's basically taking the JSON with the secrets and get this credential set into the client, the PG client in this case. Okay, thanks for telling me common sense.
Well, if it unfortunately, as we have seen last time, this is by far not common sense. So it's probably more right than a lot of developers out there, unfortunately.
Yeah, but
like I've seen
goes,
financial institution with production database credentials in the repo. Okay.
Yeah,
So to be clear.
I also saw financial institution using Mongo, by the way.
Yeah, well,
that's
okay. We are not going to get into Mongo, Luca. I'm sorry. Okay.
For another episode.
We live database choices to the next conversation. Okay. So
yeah, so Claude then forgets about EKS and he goes into Node. Then he's telling me real-time transaction processing. Connection pooling, so to set the new pool for Postgres with max 20 connections, 30,000 milliseconds and 2,000 milliseconds in connection timeout.
How does it matter for anything? But yes.
Then circuit breaking pattern. We should probably, Theos,
random
put a pin for the future and talk about circuit breaking in distributed system.
Oh yeah, no, this is actually not a bad idea. I'm taking a note.
Take a note, and also take a note that Claude thinks that Hystrix.js is top notch for doing that. By the way, just for everyone listening, I wish I could see your hand raised, but imagine that I can see how many of you are using Fastify. Oh, everyone. Good. Fastify has a plugin for doing circuit breaking that was built back in 2017. And super lean, super easy, and it works like a charm. Thanks, Thomas, for building it.
Hey, Thomas, we should invite Thomas, Luca, to talk about our database choices.
Yeah, actually, yes. If you want to get on this chat with Matteo and I, the earliest contributor to Fastify.
Well, the co-creator of Fastify. We should do a show on Fastify.
And talk about Fastify, the early days of Fastify.
Yeah.
And the challenges of databases and other interesting say it in the chat, and we will get Thomas here. That he wants it or not, he's gonna jump. Maybe Thomas is listening, and so Thomas, if you are listening, clear your calendar. You're coming here. Then Theo, hold on, hold your breath. Claude just discover cold water. Horizontal pod autoscaler. Configure your HPA based on transaction queue depth rather than just CPU. And he's basically getting SQS metrics, SQS queue length metric inside of the scaler as a metric to analyze. And he says, okay, the target value for scaling is 100 messages. So every 100 messages, scale. Okay. Interesting.
Bye, Luca.
Interesting. But I asked him about Node, not SQS. I don't know why, but okay.
No, it makes sense. Okay, it makes sense. So what it's saying, it is not totally bad. Okay, what it's saying, it's you want every 100 messages in the queue to spin up a new node, a new pod, more or less. Reason being, you assume this is assuming that essentially each pod can more or less process 100 messages at any given time, which means, in all intent and purposes, that it's doing, you know.
Oh, no, sorry, this is even worse, Theo.
Mhm.
Sorry, for how is written the configuration. He says, when you reach 100 scale, and
Okay.
minimum 5, max 50 replicas. So this thing is
Okay, so
gonna go
even
and try to process 2 messages per node at peak.
yeah, 2 messages per node. Yeah, but like, okay, so look, let's look at the overall discussion here. Okay, so we are in a financial institution. Okay, you have the most important thing that you have, and this will be surprising for a lot of people. Okay, are those that damn connection pool that we talked about a second before.
Mm.
Okay, I kind of like Claude chain of thought here, because it's you need to connect the, like, the most important thing in finance essentially is our transactions. Okay, database
Yeah.
transactions. Okay, so you have your database transaction. What happens with a database transaction is you have your connection pool. Okay, you have a connection pool. You take your connection pool, you take a connection from your connection pool, and you use that connection for that single transaction from top to bottom, up until you return the connection back to the pool. So
Mm-hmm. So
if
for
you
him, the
have,
state for him basically is oh, something happened with my life. For basically the principle that is applying is that those transaction is value versus volume. Like value is more important than volume. So
yeah, that's what it is. It's value. Like you have, it's assuming, okay, that in order to process each of those messages, you have more than one database query at any given time. So you need to use a transaction. And because you need to use a transaction, you are essentially locating that transaction for the duration of the processing of that message. It's saying that you need to configure up to 20 database connections, which means that you can process at most, okay, 20 messages from your queue in at any given time. Okay,
which is fair.
which is fair. Okay, now here's the problem. Okay, now the problem is the problem comes because you can process, as I said, 20 at any given time. Okay,
Yeah.
but not 2.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
So this is where so basically, so far the discussion seemed more or less right. Okay, there was a 2. Okay, but there was an order of magnitude
magnitude of delta.
of gap. And note that usually Node.js can be very fast in handling them, so you can even bump that connection pool, but your database need to support that. And typically the bottleneck in this case for scaling your app is your database server, which can typically, if you're using Postgres, there is an hard limit of there's a small. It's the number of concurrent connections that you can open is not high. Okay, it's relatively small. So you can run very quickly in exhausting those connections, and then you are in trouble, and you need to look in a strategy on how to handle that.
Yeah, and I mean, Claude goes on and says, "Well, now I'm going to tell you about the media industry." Okay, this one is actually interesting because we never spoke about it. Content delivery and streaming. That's the subtitle. The H2. The H2. Then the H3 is stateful workload management using stateful set for media processing pipelines, and basically says I give you a volume claim with read-write once, that is a storage, and that's basically your stateful container for putting your basically data that you are pumping and streaming. But then he goes even deeper and he says, okay, but now I tell you how to do it in Node, right? And he says, stream processing with Node.js, optimized for memory usage during video processing. And he's doing create read stream on a MP4 file, dot pipe, new transform, well, the usual stuff for building freaking streams. And now it goes actually to the next step, and he says, yes, but use a content delivery network integration for a global content distribution. That basically says use CloudFront to store then this file that you want to serve. So write them in your Kubernetes and have CloudFront to back the read of whatever you are kind of like generating. Okay, makes sense. I wish Cloud was a little bit more thoughtful, but okay. It's going through large file processing. Oh, Theo, this one is cool. E-commerce challenges and solutions. Peak season scaling. Cluster autoscaler configuration. Prepare for Black Friday with proactive scaling. And it says, data, priorities, 10, and service checkout, service payment, priority 50. So what he's basically saying is, I give you a config map and says that basically when you need to set the autoscaler priority, the top priority is given to checkout and payment, and lower priority to recommendation and browse. And then he says, yes, but don't forget to implement rate limiting. And he's basically right, rate limiting straight into express rate limit. Moment of a pause for the poor people using express rate limit.
Okay, I need to check. I need to check express rate limit now.
The API is not bad, to be honest with you. I mean,
okay. No, I'm interested in.
The API is not bad, but it does something that, to be honest, you know, you and I have been through that particular phase when we had too many requests. You remember, for server-side rendering and so on. He's actually setting the status 429 straight as a return of this API checkout. And he says, too many checkout attempts, please try again in a minute.
Okay, so there is a problem here. The express rate limit. Okay, you need to, so first of all, rate limiting is a concept coming from a specific user. Okay, you want to limit the amount of stuff from a specific user. Okay, you need essentially two levels of protection. Okay, which is one is related to the service health itself. Okay,
correct.
And the other one is related to the user. Okay, now in order to implement any rate limiting solution, this is not badly written. It's actually very well written. I hope they say to use an external data store. If they don't say to use an external data store, well, then let's put it this way: Claude has forgotten a very important detail. Okay, you know the problem. Okay,
when you use this single node,
the problem with this rate limiting solution is that you need a shared store in which you are constantly sharing the information between the various pods, okay, about any given user, okay? Because otherwise, the rate limiting solution that you're putting in place only matters for one specific server and not all the servers. So you always need to put that system in place. Express rate limit works, I think. There is the solution for Fastify, okay? The solution for Fastify is I think it's called rate limit even. Fastify. Fastify rate limit.
I think Thomas even wrote it when he was.
Yeah, I think Thomas wrote it, but then like now it's at version 10.2.2. It's been rewritten a few times. It has probably even a bunch of Lua script, I would have to say, for running. For yes, it is a massive Lua script. For doing things for doing the TTL calculation straight inside Redis in Lua.
That's actually cool.
It's freaking cool. It's fantastic because it does all the pexpire and everything straight there to guarantee the transactionality.
That's cool.
It's really nice. Like it's all done in like the full blown Redis store is all implemented in Lua.
Who actually wrote it?
You wrote it. Let me find out. Like, it was originally not written in this way. Okay, it was
No,
originally written in all commands. Not this one. Let me find out.
that's actually a very, very cool I think that's actually a very cool, unique implementation, Theo, because I don't think we saw very often the Lua integration inside of Redis used.
No, there are a very few there are quite a few cases in which that is being done. Okay. Okay, here it is. I think I found it. Okay. I think I found. Yeah, here it is. Okay, I found who did it. Is my friend Gurgun.
We should invite him and explain maybe to everyone how to what was the thought process also of doing that, because I think many people don't
Oh, the
know
thought
the
process
functionality.
was Gurgun is one of the contributors of Fastify. Okay, the other one was done. The request and the explanation was done by Arasabazi and Uzlopak, and he did explained it quite well on what
Wow.
was done.
Wow, that's actually interesting. Maybe we should put all this link in the.
Yeah, I'll put down the link in which this was done. Okay, and yeah, so you can do Lua, and it's pretty cool. It's
Not
pretty
only
cool.
to not only to play World of Warcraft, but also to.
Lua, Lua.
Oh, yeah, I love Lua. It's you know, I come
Okay.
also from gaming. I love Lua. I think it's a brilliant language. DeepMind, for example, has Lua as a programming language on top of the DeepMind engine.
Wow.
So, graceful degradation strategy. Implement feature flags for a high load period and using launch darkly.
Then okay, here I have opinions. Okay, I would not do it in that way.
Oh, it's written sponsored by Launch Dark. No, it's interesting the choice. What was the other library that you told me for feature flags? The one that
So there is. It's very interesting. We have and there is a new pattern. Okay, called I think Open Feature. Let me.
yeah, open feature, I think.
It's Open Feature. It's a new standard. So there is a shared client, generic client. Now the problem with all these solutions. Okay, let me explain the problem with these solutions and why they are they can be dangerous. Okay, and costing more effort than more CPU time than what you are than the benefit they provide to you in terms for high traffic scenarios. Okay, not low traffic scenarios, for high traffic scenarios. Okay, so the problem comes. You want feature flagging. Okay, I enable disable things. What does it mean? It means that there is a central store, a central database. Okay, that contains some logic that essentially you are a user. Okay, given some user data, you can ask this central database, is this feature enabled or not? Okay, all of this is nice and sound. Okay, now in theory, when you work under the feature flagging workflow, okay, you start adding changing behavior. You put a feature flag for the new behavior. You had your new behavior, and then once you're finished and that's landed and everybody is happy, you delete the old behavior and delete the feature flag.
Hopefully.
That's the problem. Most people, when doing feature flagging, they never delete the stuff. The old things remain there lingering forever for a long time.
Yeah, Claude is not suggesting to remove them.
Yeah, now you see now that's the problem. Okay, so you have all your code filled with feature flags. Now the problem is, so depending on how your client work, okay, when you receive a user, you give a user the context, okay, you need to fetch the key like if you have multiple feature flag, the naive approach, okay,
Yeah.
is to, oh, I am checking that flag, making an HTTP call, making
Yeah.
a database call for each time, okay, which is very expensive network-wise because that single thing can be very, very expensive long term, okay? But however, I can also do some interesting caching patterns in which I can cache the things and so on and so forth. Even that is it's a lot, creates a lot of overhead on the caller. So the generic problem with all these systems is the impact on the caller side. And whenever they are in a high traffic scenario, it's, if not implemented properly and not knowing what the problem is, it can essentially eat you alive. Okay, in terms of, oh, I remove 10 of those and will destroy, and my system will improve, I don't know, 10% or something.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that, I mean, I was exposed to Launch Darkly back at Talos because we are using it to do some clearly feature flags. But one thing that I kind of like don't understand, why actually having a SaaS or a pass for running your feature flags, not why holding it internally into your infrastructure.
Well, okay, so generically, there is no good install things that I can just install and do this. So there is no Valkey for feature flag, which is more or less like what this open feature wants to probably promote long term. Okay, so but to be honest, it will be significantly better to host in the same, at least in the same region or data center.
Yeah. But still, you I think the issue, and we saw it last time with Kubernetes, is the DNS resolving, right? And you don't want to kind of like continuously resolve the launch darkly domain and all the requests. I think, I don't know, in my opinion, it would be greater to have something like that is purely stateful within your infrastructure. You can store it if you want, like, or something that is. I'm surprised that CDNs are not actually offering this somehow this option.
I don't know. I don't know, to be honest.
Well, let's add it to the Platformatic roadmap then to add some.
Oh, look, look. So you know what we can do? We can take the open feature spec, we put into Claude, and we see what spit out of it.
I don't think Claude is the right partner for this activity, given the answer that
You
it's
will be
giving me.
surprised, Luca. You will be surprised. Me, Claude, and me can do a lot of things together that people will not think possible.
Oh no, but I need to tell
It
you,
will require some whipping of Claude, but
yesterday
you know.
I wasted probably 2 hours on Grok because they changed the UI and they swap from think to search, and it was giving me the most absurd explanation of things. And I said, no, you need to do it based on what I just told you before. Okay, let me think about it. And I was like, no, you're not thinking, or else you'd be. And then I saved the output of the previous answer and gave it as an input. Still nothing. And then I realized that I needed to move to think instead of search. I don't know if it was my mistake or Grok mistake. Anyhow, he's suggesting to do exactly the same resource allocation. This time with limiting his even physical resources. And he says the checkout API needs to fulfill request using 500 milliunit of CPU and 512 megabyte of memory, max 1 CPU, max 1 memory, high priority. Okay. Okay, now now we are coming to this one. I think is the best. Common enterprise problems and solutions. Monitoring and observability. Structure logging. Implement consistent JSON logging across services. Const Winston equals require Winston. I would have said, instead of wasting so much CPU power, I would do const Pino equals require Pino.
Well, yeah, that's...
And the answer would have been there.
Yeah. Well,
no,
there are a few... Okay, let me explain. So...
No, Matteo, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. One thing. He's giving us 3 steps. And at the end, this 3 steps could have been one single require. But I'll let you finish what you say. We go on with the step, and then you guess the require that they should have suggested. Sorry, what were you saying, Taylor?
Okay. There are 2 problems with Winston. Okay, and specifically both a few, but let me clarify the key problems for both the finance case. Okay, and the main and the e-commerce media case. Okay, so for finance, if you use anything but Pino, essentially, you are at a huge risk, okay, of losing logs whenever there is a crash. Now, if you tell your boss or your CISO or your whatever compliance manager that you're using a library that can lose logs, they will probably fire you. Okay, more or less. I put it in. So, or if you knew that you could use a library that don't lose logs, okay, it's that's the case. Okay, why? Okay, Pino, depending on how you structure it, okay, it either makes sure that it fsync and flashes the file descriptor if you are logging straight to a file descriptor before the process exit, okay. Even if you exit synchronously, process exit 0, it is able to flush it, okay. Or if you are sending the logs to a third-party destination straight from your process, like Elasticsearch more than whatever, okay, it can also do that at that point in time because it uses a multi-threaded approach. So it sends that data using a different thread. Therefore, the main thread can essentially die or wait, synchronously blocking until the other thread has finished sending all your logs. These make sure that all your logs are safe and sound sent out. Okay. Now, for the media case, okay, the problem is the amount of logs you are sending. Okay.
Yeah.
And that is also where this kind of system makes sense. Okay. You can either set up a tiered system so that you log to the file system very quickly, okay, all the logs, all levels, okay, and then you send out remotely only the things that you need, okay, and all of these is actually built in and actually, works in that case with all the guarantees that I talked about.
Probably just for everyone, can you tell 2 words on what a file descriptor is? Because I know, but maybe other people don't know. And if you ask Claude, probably is going to tell you something different.
Cool.
No, Theo, sorry. I was wondering, can you tell something about the file descriptor? Like, why is that what it is? Because maybe people don't know.
The file descriptor. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so the file descriptor. Okay. So you have do you want to if a process wants to do any IO, okay, in Unix, okay, it needs to essentially at some point, okay, it needs to tell the operating system, write this chunk of bytes to this file on disk, okay, or send this chunk of bytes to this socket, and so on, which is and it needs to tell the operating system to do that because by default the userland, the process, do not have access to any physical hardware. So, and it's all mediated by the operating system. Is the thing that guarantees security in our in modern computing. Okay, probably since the 80s or the 70s even. I don't remember. Okay, so what date was this? late 70s. It's the first Unix. So I think it's late 70s and so on. Anyway, that's the gist. By the way, if you don't have the Kernighan and Ricci, you should probably buy the Kernighan and Ricci and read it top to bottom. It's probably one of the best things you can do as a software developer. Okay. Anyhow, you have your process and you need to do this IO. Now you need to tell the operating system to do some stuff. Okay. Now, in order to do this writing and reading, you need to the operating system needs to identify, needs to give you an identifier. I said, you ask the operating system, give me an identifier for this file or this network card or this socket or whatever. Okay. Perfect. You have an identifier. That identifier, it's a number and it's called a file descriptor. Okay. It's a tiny number. Okay. And you take this number and then you use it on all the system calls and it just works. Okay. It's a number. In Node.js, you can use this file descriptor directly if you want. Okay. Probably not recommended most of the time. Okay. There are higher level APIs, safer things. Okay. But with Pino, in order to write things to disk with this control of flushing and synchronous and so on and so forth, we had to use the file descriptor directly to reach that level of guarantees and performance at the same time.
This one was the university intermezzo, you know.
Okay, so I have the story, Luca, that I told you at the beginning.
Go, tell the story.
Okay, so long time ago, okay, in a far, far away land, okay, when Luca and myself were doing a lot of consulting around the globe, okay, the number one problem Node.js had on Kubernetes was, or maybe, okay, it was DNS. Of course, it's DNS. Okay,
it's always DNS.
It's always DNS. Why? Because Node.js did not have at the time, okay, a cache, a DNS cache system. So what happened in those cases? Okay, DNS caching could saturate the Kubernetes control plane in case you needed to do a lot of HTTP requests or need to open a lot of sockets. They will literally overwhelm the Kubernetes DNS system, okay, by request. And in order for it to work, you needed to put a DNS cache in within the same process, or sorry, not within the same process, but within the Kubernetes host local, so that it will not cause, it will not overload the central system. Because I don't know, there was a moment where, doing a DNS, like doing an HTTP call had, half a second of DNS time to get the IP to go to. So bad. Now, funny story, okay. This happened today. This thing came out today. So funny story. You have at some point, okay, last summer, there was an update of CRS. CRS is the DNS library that Node.js uses, okay? Version 1.31 of CRS shipped an implementation of the DNS cache. This implementation was backported throughout the lines of Node.js, okay? And we noticed, but we didn't think it was a problem, okay? But, however, it is a problem. Why? Because if you have configured your system that, a certain DNS address is available at a certain IP, and you have put the DNS TTL of 1 hour, okay? If that IP is not available, now the only solution is to crash your Node.js, and it is not available. That solution is to actually crash the Node.js process in that way. because it has the cache. And we didn't do any other changes in the Node.js system to be aware of that thing. So today we found that bug. Okay. And we know somebody noticed because a test became flaky. Okay. However, instead of fixing the flakiness, instead of realizing, oh, this is a bug, okay, we thought, oh no, the test has become flaky now, so
let's fix the test.
Let's fix the test.
And there were a couple of questions. One that I saw floating about DNS, and probably also to reply to some point about the learning. Kubernetes doesn't have DNS caching implemented out of the box. It's your own problem. So, and the interesting thing that I want to reply to the point about AI is that AI is not AI is actually doing what every developer in the world does. It scrapes the web to learn about resourcing and try to rationalize on certain patterns, right? But it's kind of funny that the 3 points that they say are the major problem in enterprise, I think all the people listening are facing it, and they say, oh, I know it, but they don't know how to solve it most of the time. Structured logging, and Pino clearly, I mean, damn, Pino is used by Netflix, guys. Every time that you open your Netflix, this thing sends million of logs through Pino. So it kind of works. Prometheus integration. Everyone does Prometheus integration, right, Matteo? Everyone.
I have not seen an app not doing Prometheus integration, Luca.
Yeah, but there's always a difference between what you want to integrate. Integration is just a library connection and how you use it, right? But the other thing is distributed tracing that everyone knows inside out how to do, right? And in fact, everyone opens Dynatrace and still thinks that Dynatrace is an hotel, Luca. Or Datadog, right? They're all the same. Come on. But in enterprise, it's Dynatrace because it's like more corporate. You know, they have all this graph with this kind of like dark color scheme, so it's enterprise. Datadog is more fancy because of the logo. But it's kind of funny that Claude basically said Prometheus integration, just connect to Prometheus. Not even an idea what kind of metric, what is the rationale behind the metrics or whatsoever. And distributed tracing, implementing OpenTelemetry in Node.js services. But I mean, it's not a sales thing because I know I'm the CEO, but I also I'm a technical guy. It's kind of funny that we saw this thing unsolved and we built what for that? Because we were bored of actually having to explain how to do it over and over again. And Claude is still behind in kind of like recommending probably to build a big.
Oh well, because it has learned Node.js in 2015, used from the same article. Everybody has learned Node, and they still keep doing that.
And it's kind of actually, what somebody says we have to install deployment of Node local DNS to avoid overwhelming core DNS. Yeah, and I mean to this person, we feel you. Unfortunately, Kubernetes and EKS is no exception, and Fargate is absolutely no exception. Didn't really solve the problems that hurt developers and businesses. Like, to me, why AI is not wrong. AI is a reflection of the reality of the technology. That is a mirror. This is what in every enterprise, Matteo, you and I saw since 2016, right?
Yep.
Didn't really change because 2 weeks ago we were at the customer and I think we could have played the same game that you and I played when I was at the airport for going to cars.com to solve the memory leak. I think we can play that game to infinity and probably become, bored of it. But it's always the same problem, right? When you are in Kubernetes, now we nailed, I think, where the issue is. And I want to skip because we are running out of time, but I want to skip that after I basically went deeper with Claude, and I said, okay, Claude, but that's why I don't want to share, because I was going pretty straight. I said, okay, Claude, I understand that you figured out what Node and basic Kubernetes are. I also get that you are representing the majority of developers, but now let me teach you something. No answer. And then I said, hold on, sorry, let me scroll. Let's start with security groups. How would you implement security groups for pods in Kubernetes? How many of you know that the nicest thing about AWS is that their security model can be applied to all the managed resources like DynamoDB? That's great because you can do field level access control through AIM credentials. So you can do the same with security groups or pod. You can actually say, for example, security groups, groups ID. You can say that your pods are only accessible by certain security groups, which creates even more security, especially when you are in VPC. The other one is that you can actually assign AIM roles to service accounts. So what I asked, I said, what about the AIM roles for service accounts? And it gave me a snippet that said, enable fine-grained AIM permission instead of broad node level permission. And how you do it is basically adding an annotation with the role ARN to your EIM. What did I say? I said EIM, AIM. But Theo, I came to a point where it's actually, that was for you. I said, okay, this one is for Theo. What about Fargate and streaming processing optimization? What would you recommend?
What kind of streaming?
File streaming, media processing. Sorry, the context is that I said, okay, let's not focus on media. What about media processing in Fargate? How would you do it? And Claude recommends to move to serverless because thinks that is more optimal. And I said, okay, but
Okay. We can ask Netflix.
But I asked a question to Claude.
Like, let's ask Netflix. Okay, let's call our friends. Okay.
We should ask Ves to share. But I asked one interesting question too.
Or the guys from Amazon Prime.
Oh, you can read the blog post.
Yeah, but that's written. That's the blog post. Yes.
So I actually asked one thing to Claude, and I don't know how many people are familiar with that. But I said, okay, Claude. Have you ever heard of Bottle Rocket AMI? AMI? Would you use them? And the answer was like, absolutely, using Bottle Rocket AMI for improved security and performance. It's a minimal OS that improves security posture and reduces overhead. And he's writing the snippet for in EKS to create a node group using Bottle Rocket. If you guys don't know, Bottle Rocket is an image optimized for being extremely fast and lean, and is optimized to run actually on EKS. Well, then I asked other things, but they were like a little bit. Do you know a carpenter, Theo? Not the carpenter, the one that comes to your house. The carpenter with a K.
I had one. I can call them, and they can call them, and they will come and fix my shit. So yeah.
So
I can call them.
Carpenter is extremely good because it's extremely fast at provisioning.
Yeah, it's something. It's a tool for automating provisioning, building things, right?
For the cluster autoscaler. And I think so. Claude knew how to use it, but
Okay.
the interesting part comes now because I said, okay, Claude, let's move to the last part of my questions. We are in e-commerce, and it's peak season on e-commerce, what would you do? And I think Claude did some interesting stuff, to be honest. First of all, he implemented the EKS cluster autoscaler, and he was pretty smart in basically say, in order to handle peak traffic in peak season, you should actually have lower tolerance in scaling and higher tolerance in downscaling. And so he sets all the different values. So kind of interesting. I would then reserve instances for core services. So it's basically saying in this cluster configuration, these instances, don't use shared instances, use dedicated instances for core services. Sounds obvious, not many people know you can split instances in the cluster and dedicate resources to the cluster in EKS. But then it comes to the point where I said, okay, and I know that we are almost at the end, and that's why I left it for the end. Vertical pod autoscaler for efficiency. And I said, okay. Are you ready, Theo?
Okay.
Adjust pod resources automatically based on utilization pattern, right? What we are also building with the Intelligent Command Center.
Yeah.
But here it says, use minimum 100 megabyte. 100 milliunit of CPU and 200 megabyte of memory, max one CPU, 1 gigabyte. And I said, okay, but based on? So I asked Claude, okay, great idea, the vertical pod autoscaler. I get it. But for node application, what would you recommend me to use? And he gave me as an answer, resource policy, container name star, min allowed, CPU, 100 milliunit, memory, 200 megabyte, max allowed, CPU 1, memory 1 gigabyte. And I said, no, sorry, I asked you the wrong question, probably. Which metrics would you consider to decide on the size of this pod? Thinking, based on Prometheus data, I would analyze how much memory each pod uses and how much CPU each pod uses, and fine-tune based on traffic. And I said, okay, thanks. But Node uses logical resources and non-physical resources. How would you do that? I don't understand your point.
Yeah.
And that was the end, right?
Yeah,
So,
but that's normal. Like, again, okay, so 2 bits. Okay. First of all, for a system that has traffic, okay, running Node with anything less than 1 CPU is probably a waste. Okay, you probably want to at least give Node 1 CPU, if not more. Okay, why more? Because the garbage collector can run in parallel to your system, so you can actually get a little bit more performance out of a single node by allocating a little bit more than 1 CPU. Okay, first thing. Second part, okay, latest V8 change how the garbage collection work, okay? And by default, for anything less than 2 gigs, the default settings are not correct. So in other terms, you need at least to get it 2 gigabytes of RAM to get the best outcome, okay? I have a talk next week in Paris at .js, and you can ask me all the questions about memory back then, tomorrow, next week at .js, or when that thing will get published on our YouTube at some point.
So because we are at the end, 2 things. Matteo just said, next week we're going to be in Paris at .js. If you are there, come, say hi to us. Let's have a chat. Next week we're gonna have another interesting chat. But we are always open to hear from you all what you would like us to chat about, or if you want to go as deeper into any topic, we are more than open to do that. We are here for that. Matteo and I love to chat. What we did today is basically what we do, right? Is finding a problem, go through the rationalizing on what the recommendation is online, using some knowledge, some common sense, and try to derive, the best outcome. A lot of knowledge is actually coming from trying on error things over and over again and figuring out how they work. The amount of reverse engineering that we did on technology is probably humongous. And Matteo, yeah, I think I know Kubernetes unfortunately well enough to know, how to tune it. But at the same time, is when you work together that you can figure it out stuff. Because, for example, many times I asked Matteo, what is the best for V8? At the time was 956 megabyte, the magic number. Now, what is the magic number? Do we have it? No, yes or no? And that's how we kind of like build kind of like solutions. But at the same, we would love to jam with you all. So feel free to recommend anything. Don't forget to provide feedback through our survey. That's how we can make it better and make it more bespoke for you. Yeah, until then, Theo, is there anything that I forgot to mention to everyone that had patience to listen to more than an hour of us ranting, venting, and talking? Then, with no further ado, we want to say to you all, see you
Bye.
next week.
Bye,
Ciao!
guys. Bye bye.